Okay, let's look at the German verb essen. Essen is its base form, it's infinitive form with the en, as we would expect with most German verbs. And it means to eat, nice and simply. A side note is that if you're talking about an animal eating, then you actually use a different verb, and that's fressen. So it looks the same, and it's going to conjugate the same. But just so you're aware, fressen is for animals. Let's look at our present tense conjugation. And let's put the endings on that we would usually expect and see if they work. So E, ST, T, EN, T, and EN. As per normal, our plural forms are perfectly regular. There's nothing strange about them, really, ever in German verbs. The ich form is also correct. However, we do have a vowel change in the du and the ls forms. So instead of e, we have an I as the first vowel there, ist. So notice now that they're actually the same forms, because this S needs to be removed as well because you can't pronounce it. There's no pronunciation difference. So these two forms are going to be exactly the same. Du ist and sie ist. And also they're pretty much pronounced the same as ist, he is, just with a different spelling. So be aware of that. Ich esse, I eat, du isst, you eat, sie es isst, he, she, it eats, wir essen, we eat, ihr esst, you plural eat, sie essen, they eat, or you formal eat. Let's look at the simple past tense together. And we only need to know the form to know how the rest work. As. So this is actually a pretty weird form, but if you're aware of the way that vowels often do change from the present tense to the simple past and then the past participle, then it's not totally out of the ordinary. But we do also have an S set, or a scharfes S there, as. It's not a B. And so you'll often see this in literature or written German. What is it in the perfect past tense now that we've seen the simple past tense? Well, we've got a vowel change in the present tense, which means if you know about this pattern, the perfect past tense is going to have an en at the end of the past participle. It's what's called a strong verb because it keeps that en. And so we're going to say hat and then gegessen. Hat gegessen, he ate, he has eaten. What's the future tense? Quite simply, wird essen. So we're just using werden, the correct form of werden, and then putting the verb at the end of the sentence in its infinitive form. Let's look at a couple of idioms before we move on to examples. So essen is often used with gehen to refer to going out to eat something. Essen gehen, to go out to eat. And you could just put in this gap, for example, pizza. Wir gehen heute Pizza essen. We're going to eat pizza, going out to eat pizza today. Essen is also used for lunch and dinner, the verbs to have lunch or to eat lunch and to eat dinner. And we just say respectively zu Mittag essen or zu Abend essen, both of those finishing with the verb essen. And finally, an interesting one, if you say that something is gegessen, die Sache ist gegessen, or das ist bereits gegessen, you're saying that that's all over, that's finished, that's done with. Literally, it's eaten up, but you're actually saying it's done with, it's over with. Okay, let's now do some conjugation practice with the verb essen, remembering that essen is the infinitive, but we're going to have to keep in mind the forms that we learnt on the previous slide. You might like to pause right now and have a go at these 10 and then go through the corrections with me after that. Number 1, Sie essen gerade zu Abend. aber ich esse später. They are eating dinner at the moment, but I'll eat later. Notice that ich esse here is being used in the present tense, but to refer to the future tense. We do the same thing in English. I am eating later. Now, how do we get those answers? Well, the sie could either be she or they. I've taken it to be they. It could be she, so it could actually also be sie ist. That would be correct as well. But if it were they, then the ending is going to be en, sie essen. And with the ich, we really have no choice because it's not in the past tense. We know that. Well, it's unlikely to be in the past tense. And so we're going to choose the present tense. There's only one gap. And an e will be the ending there. Number 2, du isst nicht besonders gesund. You don't eat particularly healthily. Now here we do have an st ending, even though one s has been removed, and that's because of the du. We've got a vowel change because du has that vowel change in the present tense with essen. And this is one of those scenarios where we would just say eat, not are eating, because you're talking generally about someone's eating habits, not the fact that they are eating now or the manner in which they are eating now. Number 3, was gibt es bei euch heute zu essen? What is there at your place to eat today? Now, your place is referring to more than one person's place, so you're speaking to more than one person because of the euch, which is the second person plural dative pronoun. Notice that we've got a zu here plus an infinitive. Now, after a zu in German, you're always going to have an infinitive verb. Why is there a zu? Well, the verb is impersonal. There is to eat, or is there to eat? No one's in charge of the verb, and so we're just going to use a zu clause after that phrase. Number 4, ich habe heute noch gar nichts gegessen. So did you figure out that this one was the past tense? I've actually left habe in there as a clue for you. And if there's a habe, then we're going to expect that it's an auxiliary verb, a helping verb for a past participle, and that's what it is. Have eaten. I have eaten nothing today, or I've eaten nothing at all today so far, or yet. Notice that the past participle is always going to go at the end of the sentence or the clause as the second verb or the second part of the verb. Number 5. Obst wird meistens roh gegessen. So this one is a slightly harder one, and that's because we're not using what we would normally expect to use, that is the active voice. Normally we talk about things or people doing things, but this time something is being done to something else, and that's called a passive voice, when something is done to something else. What's being done here? Well, the fruit, the Obst, is being, wird, eaten, raw. So in order to form the passive voice, all you need is werden, so the word for to become, and then the past participle. So literally, fruit is becoming mostly eaten raw. Fruit is mostly eaten raw. Number 6. Jetzt willst du sicher etwas zu essen. Now, this is similar to our previous zu clause or zu phrase in number 3. We've got a zu phrase here with an infinitive. We're always going to have an infinitive after zu if we've got a verb after zu. And that's because it belongs to this broader phrase of etwas zu essen, something to eat. So the verb is not connected to a person. It's not going to be conjugated at all. It's connected to this noun here, etwas, something to eat. But the thing for you to remember is after zu, you're always going to have just the infinitive. We do the same thing in English, so hopefully will come naturally, but that's the rule to remember. Number 7. Er hat den Kuchen ganz aufgegessen. Now here you've got another past participle, and I wonder if you can figure out what's happening here. This time we don't have the verb essen. We have the verb aufessen, aufessen. So it's a separable verb. Auf is a separable prefix, which means that in the past tense, we're going to have the separable prefix followed by the GE, and then the rest of the past participle. This past participle is a bit weird because we have an extra G there, but that's just for the sake of pronunciation. And once again, hopefully you got this because I gave you the clue of hat as the helping verb or auxiliary verb to the past participle. And the verb aufessen means eat up. So he ate up the whole cake, or he ate up the cake completely. Number 8. Ich wollte der Katze etwas zu essen geben, aber sie schnupperte nur daran. I wanted to give the cat something to eat, but she only sniffed at it. Classic cat behavior. Now, really, the answer is very simple here, and it's what we've seen already a couple of times. That is, after zu, you're going to have the infinitive of the verb. And so that belongs to the phrase something to eat. So don't be confused. There are other verbs in this sentence, like wollte, that's the first verb, the modal verb, followed by geben in that clause is the second verb in its infinitive form. But etwas zu essen is its own phrase, something to eat. And you can have that phrase with nothing to, or everything to, nichts zu, or alles zu, or something to, etwas zu. Number 9. Sein Glaube verbietet ihm, Schweinefleisch zu essen. These examples are really heavy on the zu, and that's because I want to emphasize that to you. And essen often does appear with zu. So we have the infinitive straight after zu. And this means his faith forbids him from eating pork. This time, the reason we've got a zu clause is different. It's because we've got a previous clause which requires a zu clause, forbids him to eat pork. So in English, we'd say from eating pork or something like that. But in German, to eat pork, that's the phrase that follows verbieten, the verb for forbidding or banning. And number 10, nachdem gegessen hatte, schaute noch ein wenig fern. After he had eaten, he watched a little bit of TV. Now, in this sentence, we don't have the present tense, we don't have the past tense, the perfect past tense. We've got the pluperfect tense. That's something I don't talk about a lot because it's not relevant for beginners. But that's when you're talking about the past before the past. And so in English, this is very clearly recognizable by the helping verb had, and it's the same in German. So we've got had there, had, but after had, we're still going to have the past participle, gegessen, because it's the past before the past. So we've got two past tenses, had, eaten. Now, the reason that gegessen is not at the end of the sentence is because nachdem is a word that sends the verb to the end of the sentence. So the first verb, which would usually be in second position, is going to go all the way to the end of that clause. And then you're going to have a verb straight after the comma as well because of that verb, comma, verb rule. And if you're not sure what that is, look it up. But in that second clause, it's quite a difficult sentence, actually. You've actually got another complexity, which is that found schauen, found sehen is a separable verb, and so that separable prefix will go right to the end of the sentence.